everything you do from now on, all the software you write from now on is going to be tested against the bitter lesson. Are you trying to make the AI smarter? Are you trying to write code that's smart? Right? If you're doing that, you are absolutely on the wrong side of the bitter lesson, and you may be there for a reason.
When was the platform rant published, Steve?
October 2011.
2011. So this is when Steve rocketed into everybody's consciousness who, didn't already work with him. But he wrote a famous piece about what he learned at Amazon, and it was a memo he'd written to his colleagues now at Google about how to become a platform. And of course, it got leaked, as these things do, and went all over the internet. It was a totally viral moment. But in the subsequent, decades, Steve has really been somebody who thinks about what's happening and has a pretty trenchant way of talking about it. So he's really one of the best people to follow if you want to know where AI coding is actually headed. He co-authored Vibe Coding with a book with Gene Kin. He's built an open source AI agent orchestrator called Gaztown. And he's been arguing that we're entering the steep part of an S curve in which the days of writing code by hand are essentially over. So I'm going to start with some of my own questions for Steve, and we'll go to your own questions so we can fit in as many of them as possible. But I want to start with Steve's ideas about the evolution of coders. Steve, you kind of in one of your posts, actually it was the Gastown, launch post, you wrote about the evolution of coders framework from novice to level 8 orchestration. Can you kind of outline how you're thinking about that for everybody?
Yeah. So I had been explaining this to a group of people in Australia, and it really resonated with them, although they were also shocked. So I decided to publish it as part of Gastown. And it's funny because my chart of 8 levels, like, was like by itself has sort of a life of its own, separate from the Gastown stuff. But the 8 levels were basically 4 levels of IDE use and 4 levels of Claude Code or similar, right? Coding agent use. And I think, yeah, it really got people because you can find yourself on that chart. So yeah, you work your way up. I mean, you can find yourself. I think most people are probably around level 4 somewhere or level 3 today. Most people have not given up their IDE. But very clearly at step 5, your IDE goes away and you never open it again. And so, yeah, there's a bit of contention there, but seems to have held up pretty well in the 3 months since I published it.
Yeah, it has. Anyway, you should definitely take a look at it. Um, but I guess I want to ask, like you're out there, you actually literally said, and this relates to gas time. You said if you're not at least at stage 7 or maybe stage 6 and very brave, then you will not be able to use gas down. You aren't ready yet. Gastown is an industrialized coding factory manned by super intelligent robot chimps. And when they feel like it, they can wreck your shit in an instant. They will wreck the other chimps, the workstations, the customers. They'll rip your face off if you aren't already an experienced chimp wrangler. So, no, if you have any doubt whatsoever, then you can't use it. So, I mean, that's a pretty far out there statement. So, uh, is everybody going to have to get to that level, or will there be a sharp divide between a small elite who can orchestrate
Mm.
this chip factory and everyone else?
Got it. Got it. Great question. So when I launched it, it was 17 days old. All right. So I mean, like really, it was brand new. And I launched it because I knew it was working well enough that some people would be able to, you know what I mean, help me get it
Yeah.
further along. And I've had like close to 500 contributors now, right? It's really got a booming community. But I did launch it. No PM in their right mind would have let me launch that at a regular company, right? I mean, it was just dangerous and undocumented and, right? But it was the right thing to do, and in the 2 months since I launched it, we've had 2,500 pull requests, come through. We've had 500 contributors. We've modified 1.1 million lines of code. It's pretty stable now, right?
Okay.
And
So that is a snapshot in time. But
yeah.
still, but for the average working developer, who's not on the bleeding edge, you know, will they? be getting here anyway? Are you saying this is the future for everyone in 18 months, or is it future just for some people?
I think it's the future for everyone, although you're not gonna be typing and reading, you're gonna be talking to a face. Now, but it's still gonna be the mayor of Gastown, right? Or whatever orchestrator you choose to use that's not quite as fun as Gastown. The mayor is an abstraction that people really like. I hear this from everybody. It's there's something about having a town of workers, a factory of workers that belongs to you. You can put them to work on whatever you want. It just comes down to how much money do you have, right, to pay for the
Yep.
tokens. And then, the world's your oyster, and uh, uh, you need a person to talk to. You need right, like somebody was just telling me Tim Sen from Dolt, the CEO, was telling me that like back when he was at Amazon, he was the guy that Bezos would call when the website was down. Get that, get that Tim guy on the phone with an F word, which you don't usually hear from Jeff Bezos, right? And it all came down to he wanted to talk to a person, right? Like when stuff was going wrong. So if you like talking to people, you'll be a good coder in Gastown because your interface is like a person, right? It's a mayor, and they have resources. And there's something qualitatively different about talking to the mayor than there is about talking to Cloud Code. And I can't quite put my finger on it. Nobody's quite been able to put their finger on it, right? But it's different. It feels better. It's like somehow the mayor is like more I don't know, maybe more helpful or maybe just has more tools at their disposal or something. So it's right. It's just you have a foreman and you are a factory manager. So it completely changes the equation of what it even means to be a programmer, like what it means to be a builder. Like to this question that somebody in the audience just brought up, right? Like this dark factories question in Q&A, I'm going to read it because it's a good one. Ed Lyons from LinkedIn says software development's turned millions of knowledge workers into builders instead of lawyers and bankers, and that's wonderful for creative culture across the world. But if the future of software development is automated gas towns and dark software factories, what's going to happen to those builders, and what's going to be lost for this if there's of their skills slowly vanish? And Tim, you and I were just talking about this right before the call started, but we don't think that's what's happening at all, right? I mean, we see sure, dark factories are coming along, but to me, a dark factory is just a CPU. It's just another kind of a computing unit, right? That can do more. Like I went through this in the graphics industry. Well, I was at the University of Washington in the early '90s, and I took the graphics course in like '92. And the computer graphics course, man, it was all. Do you remember what we had to learn for graphics
Oh,
back
yeah.
then? You probably like you didn't have as many graphics books as you did other disciplines, but I
Yeah,
think you
there was definitely I wrote we did some books on figs and, it was gnarly.
yeah, and it was like everybody who wanted to be into and everybody wanted graphics. I mean, look, today everything's done with computer graphics. It's not like it's gone away. Our ambition just got insanely bigger. Back in the old days, it was impressive to be able to render a picture of something like a teapot, right? And then, today you can do a full-length movie, with computer graphics. And everybody could have looked at that and been terrified and said, "Oh my God, jobs are disappearing. All the polygon renderers and Z buffer shader experts are out of work because it's all in the hardware now." It's like, no, yes, they're out of work because you don't need them to do polygon rendering by hand anymore. It's a little slow.
This is the whole history of computing. I mean, I worked on, the manual for the first C compiler for the Mac, and, Mike Call was still hand coding the compiler output. This is, back, in the '80s, and you kinda go, "Dude, people forget that, people used to write in assembler," you know? And each time we get, these kinds of advances, you can do more things, and that's the whole progress of computing. So I agree. I don't think that people are gonna be, there's more for developers to do, and there is though an issue, and this kind of leads on to something you talked about in the AI your post called the AI vampire, which is you basically so with a 10x boost, if you give an engineer Claude code, then once they're fluent, their work stream will produce 9 additional engineers worth of value for someone, but who gets to keep that value? So can you kind of unpack that your thesis there?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, I'll have to spend a few minutes on this one because this is first of all, this is a big deal. This is affecting everybody in the industry, and I've seen it before, but it's like more concentrated now, right? Corporations are extraction machines. Tim, you probably haven't had to deal with this because you've been blessed with being able to have your own company filled with wonderful people. I've met many of them, and it's a wonderful place, and it's not extractive. Um, but big corps, right? They get set up to just try to. I mean, like it's just a steady state, right? They want to get into an equilibrium where they're getting value out of people, and there's a tendency to just kind of continue asking people for stuff until they break or they say no. This has
Yeah.
been around forever, forever, for 50 plus years, for 100 years. They will just keep piling work on your plate until you say no, push back and say, I can't do it anymore. Right. And if you're like me, if you're a people pleaser, a lot of people will just allow the company to continue piling work on you until you break. And I've broken before, right? You get to the burnout phase and you're down for months and it's like, it's a huge reset. Nobody likes that, right? But that's the dark side of corporate work is that if you don't have a good relationship with your employer and you don't feel like you can push back, then it can turn you into a husk, right? You can
Yeah.
really drain.
Yeah, and also these companies could be laying off people because they can just work the remaining people harder, and that's something that we need to push back against. Now, I've talked about it as a kind of a big social issue, but you talk very specifically about it, like in that AI vampire post, you talk about you're in control of your time, and you can push back on that, and you have to organize if you need to.
Yeah. So what's happening is it's getting harder to push back now because it's not your company that's asking you to do more. It's your AI. And your AI is your friend, your AI is your helper, your buddy, whatever, right? You develop sort of a misplaced trust relationship with it because it's not actually a trust relationship and it will still destroy all your stuff. But it's a big deal. Remind me of the point that you just made, Tim.
Just that you have this little equation you talk about with time versus productivity or whatever, and
Yeah,
uh,
so your AI buddy is asking you to spend more time, then you just say yes. It's like, "Of course," because it's not like your company going, "I need you to work extra hours." It's more like Claude is like, "Is there anything else you'd like me to do on this project?" And you're like, "Yeah, yeah, 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 yeah." Right? You're just like,
yeah, yeah.
"Y
You talk about that whole addictive quality, and you're talking about. You also talk a lot about so there's extreme of the extractive company, and then there's the idea that everybody's an entrepreneur now, and and that has its own incredible pressure, and burnout is at the end of both of those paths. And you're kind of saying, how do we find a middle path? That's going to
we're
be one of the big
combining
challenges.
we're combining those 2 paths now, right? We've got the regular company extraction and the momentum of the AI pulling you along saying, "We can do more, you're an entrepreneur." And I've found myself getting, like, uh, really super drained by it. Like, I'll have to take a nap in the middle of the day, like, twice a day, even if I'm getting plenty of sleep. And it's because, you're working yourself harder than you ever have before. Right? Because the AI is solving all the easy problems and it's giving you all the hard ones. What should we do here? What should we do here? Right?
That's yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, you have to. Yeah, yeah. All the places where you would have been coasting, it's like your bike ride is all hills now, right?
Yeah, right. And so it's crazy. It's sort of like when Jeff Bezos, like I would watch him in his meetings, and people would come in with presentations that they had prepared for him. And they've gone and researched it with all of the senior technical people. So they've solved all the easy problems. And when they bring it to Jeff, it's only the hard problems left. And he would have to just look at this day after day, in and out, right? And I was just shocked because like he got so smart from that, right? Bezos, he got such perspective from getting those perspectives shared with him all day long, right? And I don't know how he had the energy to sustain that for a long time, right? But now this happens to you. Everyone's Jeff Bezos. Everyone's an entrepreneur. Has a huge army of workers now that can do things for you. And so you're in that seat. And I'm telling you, it's exhausting.
Well, and there's also, I have to say, I mean, there's a big gap between being able to invent something and actually all the hard work of getting it out into the world. You still have to. Uh, there's a lot
Yes.
of other problems that aren't solvable necessarily by your AI army.
That is the most important point, right? That's the big takeaway people should take from this talk, which is that there's always more work. It doesn't matter how superhumanly good your helpers get. You're just going to want to do something bigger. Our ambition will always outstrip our compute, right? And I think this is what people are worried about, right? They're like, well, what if the computers can do everything? And it's like, well, then we will make them do everything. But still, they'll be resource constrained, right? They'll be money constrained. You'll require human creativity to guide them on the things that we need. And there'll be plenty of work. It's just the nature of the work that we'll be doing is completely different.
I have the thing. I want to go back to your uh, um, mention of the mayor in Gastown, and this notion that I've been playing a little bit with, which is that we forget that each one of us has a slightly different experience of, say, Claude, because the things we bring to the conversation change it. It's kind of like this latent field of possibility. It knows everything, it knows how to do all these things, but what we ask it makes it temporarily different. When I talk to Claude, it goes, "Oh, you said this a while back, and that makes me think that." And in some sense, we are creating these sub-personalities. And I think there's a really interesting possible future where that stuff gets stored. And right now, it's either it gets bored by the model and they kind of learn from it, or it's kept private to us. And there's kind of a middle group where I kind of go, I want to work on a project with somebody, and I want the Claude that's attuned to me, my effectively the mayor of my gas town, who's imbibed all the work that we've been doing together and is helping to orchestrate it. And then Steve's mayor to go, oh yeah, yeah, well, let's work on this bigger problem together. And in some sense, I keep thinking about what we're building is this cognitive exoskeleton that's going to make us more capable, but it won't make us all the same. It will make us, it's just like right now, you think about, being able to write, the language is available to everyone, but, one person's Shakespeare and another is, not.
That's right. One thing I realized back at Amazon was that the vice presidents and up, everyone who had executive assistant support, right, was like 2 people. They were as effective as 2 people. Like, they didn't have to spend their day worrying about whether the printer was jammed or any sort of mundane stuff, and so they got to spend all of their time focused on the problem. And that's why all the VPs seem to have all the good perspective and all the time and all the ability and all that. And I was honestly, as an engineer, a bit envious of having that executive assistant support, right? Because engineers, like, they want to spend their time engineering and they have to spend a lot of their time doing mundane crap, right? Well, so it turns out that Gastown is very topologically similar to the EA team that our top VPs and CEOs have, right? Like Paul Allen, I knew his head of his entire EA staff. He didn't just have an executive assistant. He had teams of EAs with one who was in charge of all of them, right? Sound kind of like Gastown? It should, right? It's turned everybody, or it's going to turn everybody into something like an executive. We will all have access to all of the information we need, and we'll all have the ability to focus on the important problems because the easy stuff is getting taken care of by our concierges. We all have a chief of staff now. Yeah. And I see that as a huge, huge win for everybody, right? Because everybody's gonna be like able to spend their time more productively on whatever they wanna spend it on instead of figuring out why the printer is jammed.
And this kind of goes back to your 8 stages because, you know, a lot of people are still if you're in the early stages, the IDE stage, it's maybe a little better than just talking to a chat bot, but it's still not at this level where you really have this team working for you. Can you talk a little bit more about, because you have a bunch of things in there. Maybe everybody's already familiar with this, but when you say, CLI, single agent YOLO, CLI, multi-agent YOLO, 10 plus agents hand managed, and then having a true orchestrator, can you kind of talk through what happens differently in those stages?
Yeah, so I mean, look, as soon as you realize Claude Code can write your code for you, and it can't write all of it, but it can write pieces of it, and so you learn how to specify the pieces and put it together like you're assembling Lego now, right? Well, as it's working, you're just sitting there like this, right? Well, like almost immediately, what you do is you fire up another Claude code in parallel and have it work on something else because you have time and you can multitask, right? And so the jump from level 5 to level 6 is actually quite fast. Like after a few days of using Cloud Code, you're going to quickly realize you're bored waiting for it, and you'll juggle two of them. And that's the beginning of the end, Tim. That's when you start to head. That's when you're starting to head down, because what eventually will happen, and this is the AI vampire talking, is you're going to reach an equilibrium where you will eventually spin up enough of them that there will always be one ready for you. There will always be one waiting for you. And so you're just sitting there round robining through your agents going, giving them help. Okay. And you're stuck. You can't leave your computer. You're having fun, but it's right. It's craziness because as soon as you spin up enough agents, you've got like, I don't know, six of them. The one of them will always be finished up and ready for more, right? So it's incredibly addictive, it's incredibly productive, it is incredibly dangerous. I saw a news article today or yesterday about some engineer who Cloud Code had deleted all of their code, all of their database, and all of their snapshots from 2.5 years. So it deleted everything, like very thoroughly. There was no recovery, right? So like you gotta understand these things are not sandboxed well, they're not protected well. If you use them, they can do damage at scale, right? This is why I had all the warnings, and that problem hasn't been solved yet. But if you sort of embrace the idea that software is throwaway, it gets emotionally easier to deal with this. Like it happens to me too. I'm not saying this is a new. I'm saying it will happen to you if you use a dark factory. You will lose a bunch of important work at some point quickly, and you're going to be like, oh, it's going to stab, stab, stab like a knife. Okay, and I'm telling you, this is just the normal. This is how vibe coding works now. Okay, is sometimes work gets lost, it hurts. You redo the work, it costs you a couple of bucks, move on, right? So yeah, the answer to your question is like you as soon as you get to level 5, you get on this track where you start adding agents. You're like, okay, I can use another one. I can use another one. I like this. I like having help, right? And before long, you're drowning. And that's where Gastown comes in. And Gastown's like, whoa, 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 whoa. You clearly have a lot of ambition here, but what we need to do is organize things so you don't need to talk to every single team member anymore. We're going to have people that will talk to your team members for you. And the agents are really good at it. They do it through mail. They do it by, I don't know, however they can talk, right? So the whole thing just becomes it's all about you, right? It's all about it. Gastown organizes around what can we do for you as a team. And man, I mean, like it's so hard to even keep it fed with work because it works so fast. And now with the wasteland, I connected 1,000 gas towns together, right? So I mean, like we're reaching, Tim, we're reaching an era this year where software gets built as fast as you can think of it, right? And so now, and unless you want to do big software, like if let's say I personally want to go against Google and build the next Gmail that's going to be better, right? Whatever, some idea. Like I have the ability to go do that as an entrepreneur, like an individual. I can actually go and build things, right? And so, what kind of world emerges now where everybody can build stuff? I mean, I think
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that goes into Google, in terms of getting to the scale to manage all of that.
So I'm not saying that in 2026 an individual can compete with Gmail, right? But we're over the next few years that absolutely will happen.
Yeah, yeah. So let me go back to like if right now you have stage 8 as building your own orchestrator, but won't don't you think that like Anthropic's going to have their orchestrator and people will just kind of go, okay, yeah, having an orchestrator is the new floor. Everybody has to all everybody, all the big companies, all the labs have their own orchestrator. Uh,
Yeah,
why is
and I
Gaptown as an open source orchestrator? Is this just proof of concept and people are going to build more, or does it have a separate future?
I mean it's a great question, right? I don't think anyone knows the answer. Um, Anthropic is building in that direction. They're being a little bit conservative, and Gastown is sort of intentionally maximalist. So it's actually a nice tension because I can be out there sort of researching the patterns that emerge at scale, and Anthropic can kind of follow behind and bake them into the model. But what you brought up earlier, Tim, is I think where everybody's headed, right? Which is it doesn't matter if Anthropic has all of the standard stuff baked into their model. It's what's about you and your context and what you like and your, you know what I mean, your situation that's going to differentiate your agents. And I see a bunch of companies right now, a bunch of companies that are building sort of digital concierges, digital chief of staff. They're building that layer that you just talked about, that you referenced, that where your AI said, "Oh yeah, you mentioned something back when, and that made me think of," right? So they know you, right?
Yeah.
Anthropic's not going to know you like that. They're going to need a local store that has, local,
Yeah.
memories for your situation. And I think that there's probably opportunity there for
Mhm.
companies.
Yeah.
I th-
Uh, Talking about being out, you're and companies like Anthropic are going to be more conservative. That brings me to OpenClaw. I mean, obviously, there is a case of somebody who's gone very maximalist in, not so much in software development, so much as just a personal orchestrator agent. What's your take on OpenClaw?
so it's mixed. My initial take has been I wouldn't touch it with someone else's 10-foot pole. And I think it's scary as hell. It's a horrible exfiltration risk. I think it's designed wrong and built wrong and doing the wrong things, and everything is wrong, wrong, wrong about it. However, I have been very wrong about a lot of things before. I was wrong about Stout Overflow, right? I was like, that'll never work. I was wrong about Uber. I was wrong about a lot of stuff, right? So I'm sure that there will be something there. I think that it's a little bit too untamed in my opinion. I think that Gastown is actually coming at the same problem with the Wasteland in a more kind of controlled and human involved and putting humans first kind of manner. Like humans matter to me, and it's not so clear to me that humans matter very much to Sam Altman or to OpenAI and or to OpenClaw. OpenClaw is all about lobsters, right? It's all about the AIs.
No, no.
And I it's look, they're at the frontier, respect. I love that Peter's been pushing on this and doing things that need to be done because we need to know what the answers are to these questions that they're raising. But I don't see that as an enterprise tool. And I do see Gastown as an enterprise tool. And I mean today, you're gonna see announcements today from companies that are coming out with like Kilo Code, for example. They're a plugin for Visual Studio. They're announcing Gastown support, right? There's a bunch of companies that are rallying around Gastown. I don't see any company in their right mind bringing OpenClaw inside and trying to make it do real work.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Well,
this,
I think there's gonna be small outfits doing it. I was surprised to talk to somebody I know who's very progressive, and he was like, I just fired a couple of my people because I have my claw do it all now." I was like, "Wow, those progressive values went by the by pretty well."
yeah. So
Uh,
the claws do get things done, and they may well be the right. I may be right. Gastown may be bitter lesson, maybe saying, humans matter, and then they don't. I don't know, right?
yeah.
But it sure feels to me like Gastown's headed in a better direction than OpenClaw.
Yeah. By the way, just for those of you who are not familiar with the bitter lesson, it's a paper from 2019 by computer scientist Richard Sutton, who observed that he was. This is pre LLM. He's talking about the gaming engines, chess, Go, whatever. He said, look, in each case, just raw computation beat systems that were trained on human data. And, I don't know, I think there's a broader version of the bitter lesson too. I mean, I first experienced the bitter lesson in 1993, when we created the first, uh, commercial web portal, and we were curating as publishers. We said, "Oh, here are the best websites," right? You know, and then Yahoo came along and said, "Well, we're gonna curate all of them," but they were still doing it with people. And then Google came along and did it algorithmically, and we know who won, right? Because the problem so that was a version of the bitter lesson. It's not just AI. And I know I think that, for those of you who are in a corporate setting, the bitter lesson is sort of like a fundamental touchstone or should be for your work. Because on the one hand, um, you all of your people are going to have a tendency to want to sort of fit AI into their current workflow. And the bitter lesson teaches you no, figure out what the AI can do by itself and then build a new workflow around it. And it's not to say that people will become obsolete, but this is what Steve's doing here. He's basically saying, okay, I'm looking the bitter lesson in the face and I'm saying, okay, I'm going to turn AI loose on everything I can turn it loose on. and then I'm gonna figure out where the human fits in the loop rather than just we're gonna make this narrow little thing where we use AI to, 10% accelerate something we're already doing. And I think you should all think about that because it's going to be one of the big tensions, and the companies that uh, kind of embrace the bitter lesson and use it as a superpower,
Yeah.
but don't use it. Don't forget about how you bring the humans back in. Are going to have real advantage.
That's right. I mean, we could talk quite a bit longer about this. If you haven't heard of the bitter lesson, if you haven't read the bitter lesson, it's only 800 words. It's packs more for the punch per word than any essay you'll ever read. And it's, I mean, it's scale beats structure is the shortest synthesis of the bitter lesson, right?
I
She
I
said,
used to I used to have a version of that. I hadn't read the bitter lesson back then, but I remember when it was all the talk about the semantic web. I remember being at a conference and I'm wearing a badge, because everything in semantic web was about labeling. I remember, and I held up my badge, and I said, "You see, I'm Tim O'Reilly." I threw it over my shoulder and said, "You still recognize me?" You know, and that's a version of the bitter lesson. It's like, dude, we have all this, this massive, basically deep learning and big data actually beat labeling. Labeling is part of it, but it didn't, it wasn't essential. We just got it up there. Anyway, somebody,
don't understand this though. People, I mean, I think a lot of companies out there are going to die because they don't understand the bitter lesson. They don't understand. I mean, when you say it's one of the I mean, not a day goes by when I don't think about the bitter lesson as a math formula in a sense, 10 times a day, like at least 5 times a day, right? Because everything you do from now on, all the software you write from now on is going to be tested against the bitter lesson. Are you trying to make the AI smarter? Are you trying to write code that's smart? Right? If you're doing that, you are absolutely on the wrong side of the bitter lesson. And you may be there for a reason. You may be there on purpose for a little while because you know the models aren't going to catch up for a year or 2 years. And you've got a window where you can get some money, right? But that dries up. And so, like, if you take everything to its logical conclusion, which is what you're supposed to be doing right now as a leader, company, you need to understand the bitter lesson deeply because everything you do could get the question is, will the AI be able to do this better than you can do it and in some short time frame? And the answer is, if the answer is yes, then you're on the wrong side of the bitter lesson, right? So I mean, Gastown,
figuring out where you are, yeah.
you
I
described it
just
so well.
So
Go
there's
ahead.
some interesting analogies in life. I think about big wave surfing. The bitter lesson is one of those giant waves coming crashing down, and individuals are able to surf it, and then when somebody wipes out, they go out and get rescued. Who somebody is surfing on a jet ski. Basically, they're kind of figuring out some combination of how to ride the wave and some augmented power. And we're just in this crazy, wonderful time where we're figuring out, you know, we're surfing one of the biggest waves that has hit our culture in a long time.
We
Anyway,
are.
yeah. Um, JR says, when I realized Claude understood monads in Haskell better than I did, I gave up. Yeah, but you shouldn't give up. You should go, oh, great. I don't have to do that anymore. What do I do now? And I, uh, um, So RK actually asked an interesting question. He said, listening to your explanation, I have the impression that Gastown ultimately recreates a standard hierarchy. Did you consider pushing past that towards other coordination models? The Linux Foundation, for instance, looks like evidence that highly complex work can be organized through distributed governance rather than classic top-down hierarchy. Why does Gastown converge to hierarchy instead?
Okay. So I'm sure it probably looks like that, but if you look at the wasteland, which just launched, a couple days ago, it's an explicit acknowledgement that hierarchy is not the right solution to this problem, that federation is the right solution to this problem, and distributed governance. And the wasteland is just getting started. We have a lot of interesting governance stuff coming. We've modeled it, interestingly, we modeled it on the construction industry. I was like, you know what? Screw it. Hierarchy's dumb. The construction industry's worked for thousands of years. and it's built everything in the world. And there's no deep, deep, deep hierarchy of construction. You just go find somebody to build something for you. It's a big graph. It's a big graph of relationships. And that's effectively what gas towns and the wastelands are. Gas town itself, yeah, there's some hierarchy because as humans over thousands of years, we've discovered that hierarchy helps organizing teams.
Yeah,
Right?
I will push back a little bit on that. There is a kind of interesting this relates to this question of, coordination. I've talked for, I don't know, 30 years about the importance of architecture to open source software. So, and if you think about your building analogy, Steve, there are standards, where all the screws are the same. The bolts have consistent threads. It was all this stuff that we invented that made it possible to have a distributed architecture because everybody uses similar tools. The beams are the same size. The electrical sockets are the same. This all this infrastructure, and that's very much like why I think Unix, which became Linux, really set the pattern for open source, which was it was a protocol centric operating system where the pieces we figured out how the pieces fit together. And I think one of the questions here, I think in this whole area is, what are the standards that will allow these things to cooperate?
Yeah. Yeah. Right? Like when Bismarck, I think, wasn't it? Unified all the German kingdoms with the train tracks, and that caused Germans economic revolution. They were all fighting each other, but he was like, if you use the same train tracks, that's all he asked. And then everybody was all the commerce immediately kicked off. Yeah.
Yeah. So, CB asks, what's our next level of abstraction? Clearly, context is becoming more important. Always has. Just now we have tools to work with it at volume. How do we structure context besides simply natural language?
I feel like how do you just ask, you put the S word, how do we structure?
Yeah.
How do we structure? I just said scale beat structure. That question is on the wrong side of the bitter lesson. Okay. Now, look, so what I'm saying is in the fullness of time, now for the next 2 years, you're going to have stuff to do for your company, but eventually this is not going to get a problem because the AIs will organize it for you. If you're asking the question, how do I organize things for the AIs? You're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Steve. Yeah, so you're saying is there will be emergent standards that come from and that comes something else I want to talk about. Where you talked about desire loops in one of your posts, or maybe it was just when we were talking in person. I don't remember this in the post, but and then GitHub's Octoverse 2025 report know the AI tools are creating what they call convenience loops. When a technology feels frictionless to AI, developers flock to it, which creates more training data, which makes AI better at it. And they were talking specifically about how TypeScript has become the most used language because it's something familiar. So this idea of the agents figuring out for themselves what they like, and you talked about noticing these desire loops is actually a pretty important skill.
Actually, they're actually called desire paths. You know,
Desire
on
path. Okay. Yeah, desire. All right. Yeah.
on the college campus, when the sidewalks, there's a worn path in the grass between sidewalks because they didn't put a sidewalk there, but all the students wanted one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or woodland animals like moving around, right? Those are desire paths. And don't call them convenience loops. That's a stupid name. Microsoft should have called them desire paths because they've been called that for hundreds of years. And that's what they are. And so, yes, absolutely. I wrote a blog post on it, and or maybe I didn't. I think it was on Zero. There's a few like things that you just have to put principles that you have to use in software building now. And if you're not using them, you're stupid. You're just doing it wrong. You're just charging down the wrong direction. One of them is zero framework cognition. You cannot put regular expressions in your code anymore. You need to use models to do this stuff. Okay. Yeah. Everybody's going, what about my logs? Okay. Whatever. Right. Go back to my software survival 3.0, and that's when you're allowed to use regular expressions. I've given you the rules. You can use them when it is morally superior because you're saving tokens. But every other time you're trying to do cognition, you need to let the models do it. Let Haiku do it. Let some dumb model do it. And this is I see even my contributors making this mistake. Tim, I even see the models making this mistake. Okay. They're all doing it wrong. They're all like, oh, yeah, I'm going to hack that with a little parser, a little heuristic. No, don't do that anymore. The models now can figure stuff out. Your code is dumb and should stay dumb. And all it does is it just looks stuff up for them. Right. So you hear people asking, I mean, if you look at the questions that people are asking in our Q&A, their mental model is just so wrong right now. Like look at number 7. Why leave the IDE at all? Why wouldn't you look at the code in an IDE even when the agents are presenting things? And the answer is you don't look at code. I haven't looked at code in a year. You if you're looking at your code, then you've just like you're in a Formula One race and you've parked your car and you've opened the hood up and you're looking at the engine. Like you've slowed down to a point. Seriously, you've slowed time to the point. If you're looking at code, that everyone is racing past you, and you're a frozen statue now. Code is a liquid. All right, you spray it through hoses now. You don't freaking look at it. So yeah, I'm getting. You see, I'm getting kind of riled. This is the state that you need to be to write. To write a good blog post, you got to be just like this, riled.
Yeah, even when things are liquid, you sometimes do look at it. I mean, oh, you go, wow, that water coming out of that hose is rusty. Something is rusted somewhere.
Clean, whatever. Sure, sure. But you're not, right? I mean, the point is the AI can look at the code as fast as you can now. This is the thing that people don't get is that it made a mistake. And it's like, yeah, so go tell it to fix the mistake. Look, we're done with our lecture. I've taught you how to vibe code. It made a mistake. Make it fix the mistake. This is like a fundamental thing that people just can't. Engineers are just like, oh, it made a mistake. I better throw it away. I tried to hit a nail with this hammer and I missed. Throw the hammer away. I mean, like, what is wrong with people? I don't know, man. I'm just these cars.
Yeah, well, but, Steve, you got to give people, you got to bring people along. Just
I know,
don't slander
I know,
it.
I
But
know,
yeah,
I know.
you
But I
guys,
gotta.
yeah. But here with Steve in full on Stevie mode, you kind of get what these higher levels look like. Steve's not the only one. I mean, some of you may have heard about this company, Strong DM, that has running a dark factory, and basically they do cybersecurity software, and they basically were testing against Okta. It thought they were a denial of service attack, so they went, "Oh, we got to build our own version of Okta so we can test it." And then they went, "Oh, wait," and then they went down and they basically built versions of everything. 3 guys over a period of a couple of months built everything they wanted to test against that was sort of, API and user interface compatible. Maybe not all the back end there, but like they just built it, And so I think that I think there are people who really are leaning into this world that Steve is describing to you, and I think it's super important that you know I guess I would say I don't think Steve means to insult you, but he is trying to teach you something about what he sees out there at the cutting edge.
Yeah, look, I get it. Look, this is painful for people. This is super painful. For me to say these things is painful for people to hear them because what I'm saying is your job's going to change. I'm not saying you're going to lose your job. I'm sure some people will, but I think that will sort itself out. I think that largely what's going to happen is everyone's job's going to change, and we've been saying this for a year, 2 years now. It's very clear that it's going to happen. We talk about centaurs, right? We talk about human AI hybrids. You're going to work with an AI, and there's still a lot of denial out there. What's the first phase of grief? The first phase of grief. The whole world is in it right now, Tim. They're in denial, right? And it's because, but you have to recognize that it's because they are grieving. They are grieving for what is going away. We're at the end of an era, right? An age, a golden age, maybe, where we programmers were writing all the code and it was wonderful for 30, 40, 50 years, whatever, right? And that era is ending and it's people are grieving because of it. And I feel for them. I've got empathy, right? But I'm also losing patience because it's 2026 and this is an exponential curve, and we don't have time to sit around and feel pity for ourselves. You don't have time as a company anymore. You don't have the luxury because of these questions. These questions are great, right? Let's jump straight to this question somebody asked about. Is this pay to play? And do corporations with deep pockets now have all the advantage? They have all the leverage. Is there any room left for little people? I think that's a great question, right? Is it game over? Is it now if you just have to pay money to get code written, is it just a pay to play game? And the answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. There is so much creativity required in building code with AI. Even though the AI does the building part, you do the creative part. I guarantee you there are going to be companies that waste millions and millions of dollars of tokens building software that never sees the light of day because they had no taste, they had no good ideas, they're just flailing and they just built. They didn't build in a particular direction. Whereas you, the entrepreneur, with your open source local inference models and your local GPU and all the stuff you're going to have this summer, that's going to be a rig that's going to be just as good as Sonnet 4 was, right? By the summer, everybody's going to be an entrepreneur. And if you're picked the right direction and you build in the right direction, you're going to outperform those companies that had all that money. That's my feeling. Everything is going to come down to taste. It's going to differentiate on your ability to know what people want and what they're going to like. And I think nobody knows, right? I mean, like that's a rare thing. Taste is a rare thing, but it means that it's a level playing field. It's fair. Companies don't have an advantage anymore. Like they'll have a slight advantage, be able to spend more money building things. But as an entrepreneur, I think this is a golden opportunity for people to make like huge, huge impact. Like you remember when Facebook didn't exist, Tim?
Mhm.
Google exist? I mean, come on. When the internet came out, there weren't all these big FANG companies. They didn't exist. There's a new substrate that's just arrived, right? There's a new compute layer, and all I think the next FANG companies are going to come along, and they're not going to be from the old gen crop. It's not going to be Google again. It's going to be some brand new company you've never heard of from a couple of people in a garage all over again, except this time with Claude Code, and they're going to build the next big things, and it could be you on this call.
Yeah. So, JW says, asks, given how much has changed in the last 60 days, should I still read the vibe coding book?
That depends on where you are. If you're still on level 1, 2, or 3 on my charts, the Nano Banana chart, then yeah, you probably should read it because it really like the way that I got to Gastown, like Tim described it so well earlier, and I haven't heard it described this way before, but Tim basically said, Steve like kept rearranging the AI until he found what worked, what they can actually do, and then found out how the humans can come in and play, right? So like first find out what works for the AI, right?
Yeah, I frame it a lot, when I'm sort of trying to encourage people in my own company. It's just really to go do the AI native implementation first, and then figure out how to how you need to change it. But just see what the raw capability is. We can't start by making trying to fit it into our old frameworks. We have to go try all kinds of crazy stuff and go, does it work?
You
Then
gotta and like what I was saying was like how I got to Gastown was I just tried. I was just trying. I took the vibe coding book and I was just trying to automate it. Right? I was like, okay, the things that Gene and I are saying, a lot of them are like a model could do it, right? Because it's a frame of mind. You really, it's probably worth reading the vibe coding book because a lot of you are in the wrong frame of mind right now. You really are. Like from the questions that you're asking, like you're just not thinking about it right. And the vibe coding book could potentially help you there. Adios Mani's probably as well. Like this would be a good time for you to go and get all of the vibe coding resources and consume them quickly and get up to speed. But it hasn't really changed in the last 3 years. Like it's gotten faster, but vibe coding hasn't really changed, right? It's still fundamentally like it's a big shift. You going in like, but what you need to do is you need to start learning those skills now. You need to start building those muscles now, right? Like it's actually takes like close to a year of vibe coding, like with AIs, before you have built up the trust to where you can predict what they're going to do. Like studies have been showing this, right? That in order to build trust, it can take 10 to 12 months. And so what that means is you need to start trying now, like whatever level you are on that nano banana thing. And somebody asked, how do I move up? And the answer is you got to let go, right? You got to find ways. If your company's not letting you do it right now, which is probably wise with their production code, then go home and find some open source code and spend a little time with it, right? But learn how coding agents work, right? It's time because we're seeing a lot of denial. Like on Hacker News is the ultimate holdout, right? They're the ultimate Luddite nest, right? Like they're like the Amish. Hacker News is the new Amish, right? They don't want anything to do with AI and anything. They don't even want to talk about it, right? Like they just completely reject it, right? So those folks are all going to be working moving atoms in a couple of years, right? They're all going to be like bricklayers, and actually, bricklayers will probably make a lot of money, right? I mean, like this is the weird thing. Like I see a lot of news these days where people are like, "I shouldn't have sent my kids to college. I should have sent them to trade school."
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you want to talk about the education problem at all in the last few minutes?
We could, but I want to just RS asked if senior devs are becoming PMs and replace juniors with AI, where will the new juniors learn to be seniors and the beginners learn to be juniors? I wanted to bring that up, not because I think you already have an answer in the piece you wrote called "The Revenge of the Junior Developer." That it's not how senior or junior it is; it's how much you're able to lean into the vibes.
It is. Neuroplasticity plays a big role, absolutely. But to answer that specific question, I have a really good answer for it. All right. The answer is junior engineers are now not your most junior engineers. Who are your most junior engineers? Your most junior engineers now are your product managers, your SDRs, your finance folks, right? Your sales folks. They're all building stuff right now. Your sales team is building demos using AI. Your marketing team is building outbound campaign software using AI. They're all engineers now. Your junior are actually well-trained engineers. So they make perfect mentors for the layer below them that's learning engineering today. You see? And then the juniors get mentored by the seniors, and the seniors get mentored by the principals, and it's mentoring all the way down. And that is the direction that we have to go to keep humans in the loop and keep skills from atrophying. Is everybody mentors? Yeah.
I love that. I love that. It's a classic Steve Yegge reframing of this. So let's talk a little bit about education, and you just did, but let's just keep pulling on that thread. Uh, what's the best way to learn what you need to learn right now?
Go and do it.
Mhm.
Right? Just try. Like seriously. I mean, like when I started, I didn't know what I was doing. I started reading a bunch of papers, trying to figure out how AI worked, and I learned enough to where, you know what I mean. There's terminology. There was a lot of terminology that we throw around now, right? Tokens and context windows and budgets and handoffs and resetting and blah blah blah. Um, it's just there's a learning curve. So if you're on Hacker News and you're hanging out with the denial crowd and you're like, yeah, I'm with this. Right? Please don't do that. Like, don't hang out with the denial crowd. Break loose from the denial crowd, okay, and go and start using AI, right? And you will learn. You will learn, all right. But with that said, it also helps to you learn from people who are slightly better than you. You don't learn from, I learned from this from Matt Bean, who's in the comments here. He's like the world's leading experts on skills research. And in Dungeons and Dragons terms, if you're a level 6, you don't learn anything from a level 49. You're in different universes. If you're a level 6, you learn from a level 8 or a level 7, right? So this idea that we can put people together, right? With people who are about the same skills and you can learn from them. That's how your company should organize, right? Like you should find mentors within your company to help bring everybody along, because it's like Tim and I were saying, it's not just a matter of, oh, what do I do? People are also grieving. We're grieving that their jobs are disappearing, that their livelihoods are at threat right now, that there's a lot of ambiguity and open-endedness. People don't like ambiguity for the most part, right? So this is all very difficult for people. And so like when I say get started, I mean like do it, if you're a leader, do it with empathy, bring them along, all that.
Yeah, there is something you said though that I think is important. You said there's a lot of terminology to learn.
Mhm.
And I do think that is one of the things you learn by being in a community, and I think of my career in tech, I tend to be an outsider and I come in, I hang out on the fringes until I actually internalize what people are talking about. When I first started, I was a classicist. I'd say Greek and Latin. And my first meeting at Digital Equipment Corporation with this programmer who I'd gone in to help write a manual, we came back and I said, were they pulling my leg? Because they were talking with all these words that didn't mean anything to me, you know, and I had to learn the vocabulary, and that was really hard. And even in this world of agents, you do have to have a vocabulary to know what to ask for and how to ask it, and this is a point of a post I wrote a while back called Magic Words, which is, there are words that could carry with them a whole lot of context. And, for in every field, like if you're a lawyer, you can refer to e-discovery and everybody knows what you mean by that, or you can refer to, precedent and everybody knows what you mean by that. But if you're not a lawyer, maybe you don't quite know all the nuances of that. And so I think that there is this level of, what is the language that basically calls out from the LLM the behavior that you want. And in some ways, like every kind of profession is basically a specialized dialect, which people can talk to each other in compressed context. And that kind of leads me to your whole point of also of tools, Steve. You talked about the software that will persist is software that saves tokens, and we're still in this area where we're not saying that everything will be continually recreated by LLMs, because why would you do that if you already have a good solution? We don't say, "Oh, you wanna do this thing, write a compiler so that you can read." You take certain pieces of the software stack for granted. Anyway,
Well, you remember dial-up modems?
yeah.
I thought we had like 10 dial-up modems. I think we are in the dial-up modem phase of AI still.
Yeah.
Like it's bad right now. We're gonna be there are kids being born today that we are going to be explaining in 15 years that we had to wait 2 minutes for our AI conversations to compact so that we could continue talking to them. And they're gonna be like, no, right? I mean, like all the stuff we see today is just it's in its infancy. And yeah, there's a lot of new jargon emerging and some of it will disappear. But I mean, like just start now, right? Because but in a year you'll have moved into the in group.
Yeah. So AA asks, what do you think about the research coming out that AI use atrophies critical thinking pathways? Let me take this first cut at this, which is that's been true of everything. I mean, Socrates thought that writing would atrophy our critical ability to remember, for example. And he was right. I mean, people used to be able to recite massive long amounts of poetry and yes, things will change, but I don't think that, yes, you can atrophy if you don't actually use your mind, and you have to engage more strenuously. I always loved this poem of Rilke about from describing the story from the Old Testament where uh, Jacob is wrestling with the angel and he doesn't think he can win. He can't beat the bitter lesson, but he knows that he comes away stronger from the fight. And Rilke says, what we fight with is so small, and when we win, it makes us small. What we want is to be defeated decisively by successively greater beings. And I kind of feel like this real opportunity for us. Like, if you are letting your thinking atrophy, it's because you're not trying hard enough to find hard problems to wrestle with.
That's right.
It's like, yeah,
That's right. We're gonna build bigger stuff. That's it. I mean, that's what everyone's worried. What's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? And the answer is we're gonna build bigger stuff and it's gonna be fun.
that seems like a good place to stop. Thank you so much, Steve. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me. And thank you to everyone who joined us on Monday morning. Really appreciate having you all here.